Hope is popping out all over. Okay, I'm kind of wired weird, so it's going to be a little strange today. And it's been strange all over the place for a couple weeks now, and it's hot, and we're going to be in the sanctuary. And yeah, we don't have any air conditioning in the sanctuary, but you know what? It's hot all over the place. And our readings this particular Sunday are just so spot on. They're so connected, especially the first lesson and the gospel lesson. We've got Elijah passing the cloak to Elisha, and we have Jesus asking people to follow, and he's putting up, big stoppers. Jesus sounds like he's really having a bad day. I guess he was having a human kind of day. So that's true. Our first lesson and the gospel really go together this weekend, and it's about what is required for us to be a prophet and a disciple or an apprentice of Jesus. Hey, maybe you have seen the cartoon of late. It has two pieces of corn on the cob, and the one says it's hot outside, and the other that's already got popped corn on it says something like, "Yeah, tell me about it." I think it's a great cartoon. So here we are. We're in Michigan, and it's hot. We're not going to get too much of a break yet, and it's going to stay that way. And it's not just the temperatures that are hot these days. The world in general is overheating politically. We have fiery national protests over deportation and immigration policies going on. We have religious leaders, and some even in our own denomination, condemning and judging others in direct contradiction to the Gospels. And we have escalating global conflicts. I mean, Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Gaza, Israel and Iran, and us thrown into the mix of that. And we may have or may not have, I don't know, depending on the news that you listen to. Maybe we have taken out some of the Iranian places where they're building nuclear weapons, but I don't know. How much more can we take? We are living in a hot mess. Let me tell you who else lived in a hot mess. Ah, Elijah. He was in a hot mess. After all, Jezebel was out to kill him. He said he wanted to be dead. All he had to do was stay put and she would have taken care of it. And then finally, God says, okay, you get to retire. You get to pick another person to take your place, which says that everybody in any position should always be training the next person to step in. And then in another prophet, you have Ezekiel. Hey, you got to feel sorry for him, even though Jeremiah was the crybaby prophet. But you got to feel sorry for Ezekiel, the one that's verbose, what takes 2 words to say, he takes it in 10. But he was born in a time of absolute chaos and catastrophe, which sounds familiar to some of us right now. Ezekiel lived 600 years before Jesus. Smack in the middle of this destruction of Jerusalem when King Nebuchadnezzar kidnapped and exiled all of the Israelites back to Babylon. And in the midst of this pain and this heat, well, the Israelites turned away from God and hardened their hearts. I mean, really, can you blame them? It's so easy in a time of heat and struggle, political and otherwise, to allow the world to just turn our hearts into stone. I mean, we've all been there. Like when you're on the receiving end of a constant barrage of hate, or you're there in the midst of a heated personal struggle, and maybe you just read one too many of those horrendous headlines that are out there. It's not hard to turn your heart into a fortress, and even to sometimes, turn away from God. And today we pay attention to those scriptures and redemption stories of all kind. Elijah has had enough. He passes the mantle to Elisha. Jesus knows Jerusalem is his destiny, so he wants people who will give their all to the movement. And let us recall that even during the worst betrayals, God offered the Israelites forgiveness. God actually softened their hearts and welcomed them back. God had said to Israel, I gather you from all countries and bring you into your own land, the land of milk and honey. And upon arrival, two, Joshua and Caleb, say, it's going to be okay. The other ones are like, there were 12 sent. The other 10 said, oh, no, there's big giants over there. Do we really want to go there? Maybe we should go back to Egypt. God promised the land and said, I will sprinkle clean water on you and you shall be clean. And here's the line I love. A new heart. I will give you a new heart and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove from your body the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh, a feeling, an emotional human heart. These stories just tell us that God's grace can work in the hardest times, and God can soften even the hardest heart. In fact, I think God uses heat to help us transform and even blossom. But the key is to help us transform. Be ye transformed, says the other scriptures. God never is going to force it upon us. We are the ones that have to make the choice. You know, Elisha had to decide to pick up the cloak, leave the familiar, not look back, and recall how looking back turns someone else back in Genesis into stone. Go down to the DIA and you have that wonderful picture of Lot's wife. It's not a picture, it's a statue. Let me change gears and offer a practical, kind of fun look of our lesson. Okay, I alluded to the picture of the corn, and now I'm going to show in my own weird way how we can look at the heat. Imagine a single popcorn kernel, and there is a graphic from the popcorn company in Grand Rapids. You can look it up. You will see inside the popcorn kernel, there's a tiny little bit of water surrounded by a bit of starch inside a hard outer hole. Now, most of you know this. When heated, that water turns into steam, and that builds pressure, and until that hole bursts, at which point that fluffy starch comes forth, and we get to know it as popcorn. A whole grain, a healthy snack, that brings people together and makes us happy. I mean, who wants to go to the theater and not have popcorn? Here's the point. People are like popcorn. When faced with heat and pressure, we have two choices. We can stay locked in our hardened emotional hearts and holes, or we can use that heat and experience transformation and blossoming into something healing, something that brings hope. I mean, don't you just love that popcorn? It can really get to you. You love the smell of it. You like the taste of it. So let me ask you this. What heat and pressure are you feeling right now in your life? What strengths have you gained from the experience? And how could the story of your pain offer hope to someone else? And what could you create that could be a resource of hope for others? Think about that. And I've got some secular music I'd like you to hear. And I would love to get everybody a little bag with the seed and a little popped kernel. The seed before it's heated up, and what becomes later, that lovely popped piece of fluffy transformed corn. Yes, that would give you a great visual for you to have. And you'd think she's crazy again, but that's okay. Let it remind you of God's power to transform our hardened hearts into something healing, something new. You know, picture having that kernel of corn and a piece of popped corn, and look how it changes and how the change is positive. You know, maybe, just maybe, hope might start popping out all over. And the church says, Amen.